Hello, everyone. Good afternoon, for some good evening, and for others good morning. This is the third in our series of webinars on family, school, and community engagement, sponsored by the U.S. Department of Education in partnership with the United Way Worldwide, the National PTA, CEDL, and the Harvard Family Research Project. We appreciate the United Way providing all of our technical assistance. Today, our webinar is Data-Driven, Making Student and School Data Accessible and Meaningful to Families. We have with us a bevy of presenters. I think you'll very much enjoy this webinar today. Our first will be Anna Hidden, Director of Parental Options and Information at the Office of Innovation and Improvement in the U.S. Department of Education. Ms. Hinton will be followed by Kevin Jennings, Assistant Deputy Secretary for the Office of Safe and Drug-Free Schools, also at the U.S. Department of Education. I will provide some moderation for this particular webinar and kick us off for our three last presenters: Jennifer Saltstein, Program Director with NYC Parent Link at the New York City Department of Education; Barbara Taveras, who is the Director of Community Engagement with New Visions for Public Schools; and Delisa Crane, the Grant Administrator for the Nevada State Parental Information and Resource Center, PERC, and also with the Education Alliance of Washoe County. We'd like to continue now with comments from Dr. Anna Hinton.
Thank you, Zena. Before I get started, I too would like to thank and acknowledge our partners for helping to make this series possible. Also, before I get into introducing our first speaker, I'd like to just recap sort of where we've been and where we are and how we got to this point, being the third webinar in our series. With the first webinar, we really sought to reframe this conversation around family engagement. We wanted to build a foundation for the subsequent webinars that we had, as well as a context for this larger conversation around family engagement. Our presenters on that first webinar consisted of Heather Weiss from the Harvard Family Research Project, Nina Sazer-O'Donnell from the United Way, and Ron Meir from the Iowa PERC. And these presenters collectively offered up a research-based definition of family engagement and examples of what we call systemic, integrated, and sustained family engagement efforts. So our goal with that first webinar was really to make the case for why we need to change the way that we think about, strategize, and do family engagement. We talked about moving away from random acts of family engagement to more strategic efforts that are really driven by data and that are linked to learning. With the second webinar, we really set out to build on the first one by providing concrete examples, more examples of not only what it is we mean by systemic family engagement, but how to do it. And so we have presenters like Michelle Brooks, Assistant Superintendent of Family and Student Engagement at the Boston Public Schools, Barbara Scher from the Maryland State Department of Education, and Susan Schaefer from the Maryland PERC to talk about their family engagement efforts, how they use Title I funds to support these efforts, and most importantly, how they've conceptualized family engagement as a strategy used to improve student achievement and school performance, and not, again, as a one-time event or random effort. So this brings us to this third webinar. And here, once again, we seek to provide examples of how to implement systemic, integrated, and sustained engagement. Our focus with this third webinar, as Zena mentioned in her title, is data, and focusing on ways to use data to make our family engagement efforts more meaningful. And with that, we have 4 presenters lined up today. And starting us off, as Zena mentioned earlier, is Assistant Deputy Secretary for the Office of Safe and Drug-Free Schools at the U.S. Department of Education, Kevin Jennings. Mr. Jennings serves as the Principal Advisor to the Secretary on departmental matters related to safe and drug-free schools and character education programs, and represents the departments at national and international meetings related to safe and drug-free schools and character education. Mr. Jennings brings to this role as Assistant Deputy Secretary over 2 decades of experience as a writer, a teacher, and a leader in the fields of K-12 education and civil rights. So with that, I will turn it over to Assistant Deputy Secretary for the Office of Safe and Drug-Free Schools, Kevin Jennings.
Great. Well, first of all, thank you for thank you for inviting me to be part of this. It's a simple fact that we know that students who have young people whose families are engaged do better in schools than those who don't. And it's very important that we do everything we can here at the department to enable families to support their kids. So I'm not quite sure how to advance the slides because I actually don't control the slides. So, I think you went a little too quickly. So let me talk a little bit about the Office of Safe and Drug-Free Schools and how our work fits into the larger work of the department in making sure every kid can access a quality education. It's actually pretty simple, as you can see on the screen before you. We believe that students can't learn if they don't feel safe, period. And that everything else we're trying to do in schools will fail unless students first feel safe. Because obviously a kid who does not feel safe cannot focus on learning, cannot focus on the academic process. So we're the foundation of everything that is required to help kids achieve. So next slide. The problem that we find right now is that the way people think of school safety tends to be very narrow. They tend to focus on horrible events like Columbine or Virginia Tech, and they look for those spectacular, awful, criminal events that have horrified the public over so many years now. The fact is those things are pretty rare, though, and they're becoming increasingly rare. If you look at rates of criminal victimization at school, whether it be violent crime or theft or serious violent crime, you see that all of those have declined since the early 1990s. Next slide. But our point is that this is not the big issue that most kids face. Most kids are not worried every day that there's going to be a Columbine-style shooting at their school. What they're experiencing is bullying, harassment, name-calling, social exclusion, the things that sociologists call incivil behavior. These issues are more than twice as likely, or about twice as likely, to cause students to avoid schools as are the spectacular things that make the evening news on the events when they occur. Next slide. So let's start by redefining what a safe school is. Let's start at the foundation. Of course, a school has to be physically safe. We don't want guns or weapons or violence in our school. No child can learn in that kind of environment. But they also have to be emotionally safe. If a young woman's sitting in my U.S. history class, and I was a U.S. history teacher for 10 years, and she's getting text messages from a boy at the back of the class saying inappropriate things to her, or she's worried about what's going to be written on her locker when she goes to get her books between classes, or what's going to happen to her in the bathroom, or what's going to happen to her on the bus on the way home, I can guarantee you she is not thinking about U.S. history. So we need to make sure that there's emotional safety for our young people as well. But we would argue that a safe school, to be truly safe, needs to be more than a place where nothing bad happens. It needs to be a place where good things happen. And those good things have to be based on every kid feeling like they're valued, like they matter, and like they belong every day. If you think back to your own school experience, like me, you probably remember that the classes you did best in were the ones in which the teachers made you feel like they cared about you. Isn't it funny that we all know how important that is for young people to get, yet among the many, many assessments that we conduct in schools, we almost never assess that. Next slide. That's what we are proposing to change in the Obama administration. Go back, please. Under the Office of Safe and Drug-Free Schools. The Safe and Supportive Schools grant program is a new grant program we launched last month, and what it depends on is surveys of, in my opinion, the only people who actually know if a school is safe: students, the staff, and the families of the students attending those schools. Those are the people who know what's going on in the school. If we rely on just incident data, the number of crimes, the number of guns, etc., we'll always have an incomplete picture because so much of the stuff that goes on in school is either not serious enough to be considered crime or does not happen within the view of adults so that it gets recorded. The Safe and Supportive Schools model recommends that schools survey students, their families, and staff on 3 key indicators. Engagement. By engagement, we're talking about things like the relationships between students and staff, between staff and families. Respect for diversity, which is self-explanatory. And school participation. Do students have meaningful activities that make them want to be at school? Do the staff feel they have a say over what happens in school? Are parents truly welcomed into the school, and do they get the information they need to support their children? The second big issue is safety around things people are familiar with from our past work, physical safety and substance use, and also the new issue of emotional or psychological safety, as I like to call it. Then the third bucket around environment, which is really looking at, does the environment promote or inhibit students' learning? The physical environment, what about the building? What about the books, the computers, the types of things that kids physically need to be able to learn? The academic environment, do they have access to teachers who can give them extra help? Do they have access to nurses and counselors who can help them with physical or mental health challenges? The wellness environment, is there decent food in the school? Is there PE which actually involves exercise? And finally, the disciplinary environment. Are the rules clear? Are they consistent? And are they fairly enforced, which is really, really important. Because what kids want to know is that they're in a safe environment, but also that everybody will be treated equally and fairly. So the Safe and Drug Supportive Schools model, the new direction of the Office of Safe and Drug-Free Schools, is designed to use the incident data as well as the new survey data to generate a school-by-school safety score. We give the money to the states, they develop their measurement system, and they report out to families the results of the school safety measurements that are done building by building. We believe this is important for three reasons. First of all, we also provide grant funds to spend on the schools that have the biggest safety challenges. We need to have that data and know exactly which schools have the problems if we're going to spend our money effectively. Secondly, we think that every parent has a right to know if their child's school is safe, so that parent can make informed choices about where they want their child to go to school. And then finally, it is a goal of this department that there be transparency in everything schools do, that the more information people have, particularly families, the better they can do in terms of advocating for their kids and supporting their kids. So what we will find, the competition closed yesterday. We have enough money for 5 to 7 states to pilot this system in the coming year. 31 have applied, which we are thrilled by the level of interest, but also daunted by the fact that we won't be able to support that many. But in our Elementary and Secondary Education Act Blueprint for Reform, you'll see if you go to that this is really envisioned as the future of our safe schools work. We hope that Congress will agree and will appropriate and legislate accordingly, and that within the next few years we'll be able to enable any state that wants to set up a system to measure school safety effectively and appropriately at the building level will have the funds to do so. Let me close by saying that, next slide. A lot of why I came to Washington was because I knew how kids were suffering. And the week I was offered this job, I learned the story of this young man, Carl Joseph Walker Hoover, who was a 6th grader in Springfield, Massachusetts, which is about an hour and 15 minutes west of where I taught, who during the 2008-2009 school year was relentlessly bullied and harassed at his school. In April of last year, around the time I was asked to come to Washington, Mrs. Walker was making dinner and her son went upstairs, she thought, to do his homework. When he didn't come down for dinner, she went up and knocked on his door. When he didn't reply, she opened the door and she found her 11-year-old son hanging by an electrical cord. It is critical that we get school safety right. No child at age 11 should conclude that it is better to die than to go to school. That's why we feel a sense of urgency around this. We know that we have to involve parents both in giving us information about their ability to engage in schools and also us giving them information about what's actually going on in their kids' schools. Because we don't want to have any more parents have horrifying stories like Mrs. So with that, I'll close. And I can't recall if we were going to take a question now or move on to the rest of the presentation.
I think at this point, I'm looking at the questions, and it doesn't seem that there's any directly for you, Kevin. Thank you so much for your presentation. It is obvious that the Office of Safe and Drug-Free Schools is utilizing data to help children be safe and keep parents aware of how not only they can help their children be safe, but also provide information that will enhance the programs that schools are putting into place through the Office of safe and drug-free schools. Kevin, you have helped to bridge from your experience as both a practitioner in the school systems as well as now as a federal policymaker, ways that we can ensure children are going to be safe as students from all ages. And I think that as an advocate for school parent, student, and community connections, the Office of Safe and Drug-Free Schools is in great hands. And I think that our audience was very happy to, I'm sure, hear about what your office is doing. Thank you so much.
Well, I'm delighted to have been able to be part of this, and I want to let people know, if you want to stay in touch, our emails are very easy to figure out at the Department of Education. It's firstname.lastname@ed.gov. So in my case, that would be kevin.jennings@ed.gov. Please feel free to offer suggestions, ideas, ask questions. We work for you here in Washington, so you're our boss, so tell us what you need.
Great. We really appreciate your involvement. And so for our participants in the webinar, if you have questions after this point, we are not sure that Mr. Jennings will be available to us at the very end when we do have a question and answer period for all of our presenters. You might want to either email him or find him in another way. Again, thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Bye. And now we'll move on. We are focusing on the issue of data systems, and its connection to ensuring that we have family and community engagement utilizing data and utilizing data systems. One of the things that we know about data is that it is a way of telling us a story. It helps us to provide what has gone on in terms of the past all the way up to what we can potentially predict for the future, all around hopefully achieving outcomes and goals. You know, data is diagnostic and prescriptive, and it should be from cradle in terms of early development and readiness to career, which is a pathway to college and helping our students be productive citizens. You know, good data and good data systems obviously will help teachers and administrators, parents and other family members, as well as students, better understand where they are and where they are going. And it creates a feedback loop that will help when we are making assessments that capture data and provide for us what are innovative ways that we can then figure out what we need to do, where we need to go, and how we can be helpful. Important data and data system features are numerous, but some of the most important ones are that they are accessible to teachers, administrators, parents, and students. So, to be able to have that data, and I gather we're hearing a little feedback, and they're working on that issue, and that it is not only accessible, but that it is understandable. It is one thing to have data and data systems that have lots of data, but if no one understands it, they are not going to use it. Data has to flow in all directions. It has to be not only accessible, but it has to come from both the school system, the family system, students themselves, and then has to go back into all of those arenas. We obviously have to have it where it is actionable. That means the data is not only usable, but we can take action based on it. And it will not do us any good if that data or the data systems we have does not provide us with valid and reliable information that can be used in making sound decisions. Obviously, data is one of the most useful tools in making decisions on a daily basis for achievement of outcomes for our students and for our schools. We also obviously have to have a technological infrastructure that allows us to not only collect the right kinds of data, but also to house that data, manage that data, and move that data forward. And I think that systems currently are moving in that direction. I saw a quote. It said, "We need data-intelligent teachers, students, parents, and technologies to move us forward and continuously improve using data," and how true that is. In terms of designing data systems, there are 5 key features that have come to us from the education sector organization, and as you see, the reference for that is there if you would like greater detail. But what they have provided for us is a framework in looking at where we need to go with the data initiatives and systems that we have. You know, many data systems have been very much compliance-driven and really included state assessment scores, etc. What it hasn't necessarily been is real learner-centered, real focused on the individualized guidance we would need to have a student move in their learning and in their school environment. Obviously, it needs to be both quantitative information and qualitative information. The data system has to be timely and accurate. It does not help when you have results that are a year and a half old. And it has to be very, very specific so that then a plan for those students can be achieved. It has to be that the data initiatives that we put in place go across. They go across schools, they go across districts, agencies, programs, and even interventions. You know, how many times has a school housed an after-school program in it, but yet the after-school program data and the school data don't meld and people can't talk to them at the same time? It has to be a seamless exchange of information, and not only just at one local site, but it has to be local, district, state, federal levels. In doing that, some of the things that will need to be done is to have some common yet open systems where we have common policies, technical standards, and protocols across institutions, where there is some core data that people can customize for their own setting and environment, but that is understandable by all of those that are involved. And in order for people to even use it, it's going to have to be useful, accessible, and easily adopted. You know, it has to be intuitive. People need to be able to go into a data system and look at data and know how they can use that data. It has to be very user-friendly, because the more user-friendly it is, the more useful it is, the more it will get used. And of course, the more we use the data, the more appropriate and timely decisions that are going to be made. And in terms of the kind of data that needs to be included in it, you know, we have always been very good about getting assessment data in our school data systems, but we haven't been as good about putting in the progress, process, and changes that have occurred with what has gone on. It has mostly been quantitative with numbers and scores. It hasn't really talked as much to what we call the qualitative end, which is telling the story of how students progress and make changes, or how teachers have made changes in what they have done in terms of decisions around curriculum. You know, together, all of this data would give us a full picture, and if we are both learner-centered across institutions with some commonalities, data systems could then excel into our future and provide us with an enormous amount of information and guidance. So engaging educators and families and parents and students, they will make student success and the responsibility of student success be a central focus for all of us. And not that that is not the case now, but this will provide us with the backing in which to do that. That's just a little bit of a framing for what we're hoping to talk about today. As our current Department of Education Secretary Duncan has stated, the cycle of continuous improvement cannot work without good data. And longitudinal data not only strengthens accountability and transparency, it empowers families to make informed decisions. And that is where we obviously want to be in education. You know, a thought for all of you is that, you know, without data, we are just people with opinions. And I will leave you with that thought and just tell you a little bit about what you will be hearing now in the next remaining portion of our webinar. This webinar is going to feature 3 outreach efforts to engage low-income schools and families to seek and use data to support learning in and out of school. Each program has staff dedicated to this work and tools that they have created to enhance engagement of families and communities. All of them emphasize data-driven decision-making with the involvement of educators, families, and students. Our first presenter represents the NYC Parent Link through the New York City Department of Education, and she will be talking about the system that they have put in place. Our presenter after that will be talking from New Visions for Public Schools. Both of these are located in New York. They both serve the public schools in New York City. And interestingly, they will talk to how 2 very different organizations, one government-run and the other a private organization, are connected and linked across institutions to work with some of the same data. Our third presentation is from the Nevada State Parental Information and Resource Center, the PERC, as it is known. And PERCs are throughout the nation in 62 different statewide and territory locations all over that provide assistance to engage families and communities with their schools, to provide them with information that is pertinent to helping them know more about the school systems, about accountability, and moving their children forward in terms of being able to be participants in their learning both at home and at their schools. And so I will start with our first presenter, Jennifer Saltstein. Jennifer currently works as the program director for NYC Parent Link, an initiative of the New York City Department of Education. In this role, she has worked to develop the tools and content within NYC Parent Link to help parents develop meaningful partnerships with their child and their child's teachers. She continues to work with parents in community-based organizations across New York City to use NYC Parent Link to improve student achievement and to inform future enhancements. Prior to joining the New York City Department of Education, Jennifer worked as a senior product manager, parent and student reporting, and through the GROW Network. She holds a bachelor's degree from Duke University and expects to graduate from New School University with a MS in nonprofit managing next year. We are fortunate to have Jennifer with us, and we are looking forward to her presentation. We will, after her presentation, take a few questions for Jennifer. Jennifer, welcome.
Thank you so much, Dina. Thank you. So we just want to start by looking at the homepage for NYC Parent Link. We don't have a lot of time together, so if there are questions you have or information that you'd like to learn about NYC Parent Link, you can always go to schools.nyc.gov and learn more information. So ARIS is the Achievement Reporting and Innovation System, and it's New York City's system-wide data reporting system. And if we look at this map, in green and in blue, we see what educators access in ARIS. So educators can access information about each of the students they teach, they can run reports on that data, and then they can connect with colleagues, share best practices, and work to improve student outcomes. If you'll notice, there's a one-way arrow going from the student profile under My Students to the student profile in Parent Link. And that's really what we're sharing with parents in NYC Parent Link. We're sharing that same view of student data with parents so that parents and teachers are looking at the same data and able to have a conversation about how students are doing. And so a lot of the work that we've done over the past 2 years is to figure out what is the support that parents want and need to use this information. And so when we rolled out last year, we actually set up feedback sessions in every borough and worked with a variety of parents to get their feedback on the questions they had about the data, ways that they were interpreting the data without support, and the kinds of support that they needed. And in response to that feedback, we've really developed two key supports in ARIS Parent Link. The first is that the site is fully translated and available in all of the New York City's official languages. So right now, parents can access the site in 9 languages. And beginning in October, we're going to be adding French. And so it's a great opportunity for parents who don't read or speak English to get a full picture of how their student is performing presented to them in their own language. The other support that we provide are walkthroughs. So for every assessment, for every key measure that we have in ARIS Parent Link, we've developed these tutorials. And the tutorials are student-specific and really focus on looking at what is this assessment? Why does my child have to take this test? Or how does it help you teach my child? We know that parents are concerned about testing that goes on in the schools, and we want to help externalize why that test actually is helping their teacher to get instruction. Then parents can actually view a graphic. So when we present data in ARIS and in ARIS Parent Link, there are a lot of measures. But we want to focus on the key measure that parents should understand in order to work with teachers. In addition to the graphic showing how the student performed, parents also get a textual description. And wherever possible, we use dynamic language and embed the student's name to really connect what we're learning with what a parent expects to see. And then finally, parents get a list of resources and recommendations for ways they can work with their child to support them. ARIS Parent Link, like many of the systems we're talking about, contains attendance records. In middle school and high school, parents can access transcripts, New York State test results. And then in New York City, every school has a periodic assessment program, and so parents can now actually view those results in ARIS Parent Link. And Zena spoke about the need to get parents data that's more frequent and more fresh, and this is a way for parents to understand how their child is performing against the expected measures for that year. In New York City, there is a significant effort to hold schools accountable, and we have a robust accountability system. ARIS Parent Link gives parents a way to look at all of those accountability reports, and it also provides them with the support to use and interpret them, to support their child's school, and also to find schools that are right for their child at those moments of transition. And then it contains translation in languages, parent tutorials, and links to other DOE resources. ARIS Parent Link launched in May 2009, and since we launched citywide, we've had 340,000 accounts accessed. What that means is that in a city with just over 1 million New York City public school students, 340,000 of those accounts have been accessed at least one time. Starting this fall, we'll be collecting better measures to understand how frequently parents are coming back. But we are very excited that we've had adoption this high. When we thought about ARIS Parent Link, there were a lot. I feel like we've talked a lot about great things to keep in mind when designing data systems, and these are really our guiding principles. We had a very limited budget and wanted to find the best way to develop the best tool possible for parents. And our priorities were a focus on academic progress. Certainly, we would like to expand to provide more services, but really focusing on academic progress, transparency, and really empowering parents to develop a new level of partnership with their educators. And a lot of our work has been to work with parents who may not think that they have a specific role in their child's education, to reach out to them and to help bring them into the system. And so to do that outreach, we initially tried to get parents to log in by sending out personalized login materials for schools to distribute. So schools could just send out usernames and passwords, and parents would log in. We saw a lot of adoption with that. But our most significant outreach and success has really been when we work with other DOE divisions and embed our work with other interests that parents already have. We've also done a lot of work to find parents who are not in the school community, but are in the larger community. So we've taken staff and brought some computers, a laptop with broadband, and gone to libraries and food pantries, events at the Parks Department, and worked with community-based organizations. We did a pilot last fall and were able to give schools a small amount of money to try innovative strategies. And one of those schools actually developed a parent resource room with a washer and a dryer and a television and a computer and lots of computers with internet access because they're across the street from a shelter. And so it's actually creating a great opportunity for parents to come into the school and to feel more welcome in the school community. In terms of thinking about rolling out something like this, it's incredibly critical to communicate with parents and understand what their needs are, and to communicate with educators and to make sure that you're bringing the two together. At the end of the day, the schools that have been most successful have had significant principal buy-in, and it's been an entire school-wide effort driven by the principal to get parents to use ARIS Parent Link. But at the end of the day, all of this is only a tool. So it's important to embed this in the context of improving student achievement and engaging parents, and never just about getting parents to log in. Some of the challenges we run into are making sure that parents have internet access. A lot of parents in the city don't have an email address, and so we've actually come up with some forums to make it really easy, and we help parents set up an email address. We worked with parents to develop the data and support that we provide to them, but there's always an opportunity to enhance that. And then really raising awareness about ARIS Parent Link. For schools that have bought into this, it's great and parents are using it. But in schools where parents aren't coming in or the school isn't doing a lot of outreach, parents may not have heard about it. And so we're trying to use the community as much as possible to get the word out about this right and opportunity for parents. And Zena mentioned the importance of ensuring that there is frequent data. So going back to that, as we look to improve the site, we're working to develop more robust support for parents and finding ways to add more data in for parents. Looking ahead, ways that we're going to focus on getting parents to use the system are sending out login materials again. That's really critical for us. We tried to do that before parent-teacher conferences. We found that that's a really good model for getting parents to look at data, prepare for the parent-teacher conference, and then go into that really short meeting with some specific questions to really target it on how they can work and improve their students' outcomes. We'll be doing training at the school network and with community, and we're doing a technology grant in 128 high-need schools who have committed to providing this technology for parents to use the computers in their school.
Thank you so much, Jennifer.
Sure.
We have a number of similar questions, and so one of the questions that some of our participants have been interested in is in particular with the low socioeconomic parents, how you get them into the system and how you ensure that they stay in the system.
It's a great question. So we work with schools to provide support, but we also have found that by working with community-based organizations and service organizations that are working with parents, we can get to parents who might not feel like it's their opportunity. A lot of it is about going out to food pantries and empowering community-based organizations to do that work themselves.
Great. And there are many other questions that are asked of you, and we will be sending those some of those to you after the webinar, and hopefully we can be able to post some responses from the webinar for the rest of these questions that have come up. Thank you so much again, Jennifer. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Your comments and talking about your internet-based data system for students from K to 12 that is systemic across all of the public schools in New York City, although at this time ARIS is not beyond the bounds of New York City. That's correct. Correct? And so for those who are interested, they would need to contact Jennifer about how they might be able to replicate this in their own systems. Moving forward, our next presenter is Barbara Taveras, and she will be talking about using data to engage parents and students in college readiness. Barbara is the Director of Community Public Schools. From 1993 to 2004, she served as the president of the Edward Hazen Foundation, and prior to that as Education Policy Analyst for the New York City Office of the Mayor. She was the co-recipient of the prestigious Council on Foundations Scrivener Award for Creative Grant Writing for her role in designing the Funders Collaborative for Strong Latino Communities. She is co-founder of the Dominican Community Bridge Fund, which is a Rockefeller Philanthropy Advisors project, formerly a Revson Fellow at Columbia University, and former Kellogg Fellow in the Leadership and Philanthropy in Americas program. She has an MA in Latin American Studies from Georgetown University and a bachelor's degree in political science from Pace University. Welcome, Barbara. We are looking forward to your presentation.
Thank you, Zena. And I would like to share 2 data tools that New Vision has created for parents as part of our college readiness campaign. But first, I'd like to note that these data tools complement the ARIES Parent Data System of the New York City Department of Education that Jennifer just talked about. Before going on to talking about the 2 data tools and also telling you how the New Vision schools are beginning to use it with parents and students, let me give you a little bit of background about New Visions. I think New Visions is best known for leading the creation of small public schools that replaced some of the large underperforming high schools in New York City. And a recent independent study that was just conducted by Manpower Demonstration Research Corporation, or MDRC, shows that the small high schools, 2/3 of which were created by New Visions, have contributed significantly increasing graduation rates in the city. Of course, we are elated by those findings, but our goal as an organization really is not just that our students will leave high school, more importantly, that when they leave high school, they will be ready for college. So 2 years ago, we launched a multifaceted college readiness campaign, better known as Good to Go, or G2G. You will see in this next slide. The focus of G2G is really on increasing graduation college ready, as we like to think about it, meaning that when the students graduate, they will enter and they will succeed in college. When we launched the Good to Go campaign, and mindful of the fact that parents are really critical in not only making sure the students will graduate, but that they will prepare students to go on to college. And as you can see on the next slide, there are some critical roles that parents play in that pathway to graduation and college. And so when we launched the campaign, we wanted to make sure that parents were on board with our post-secondary education goal. And one way for us to begin to do that was to put in the hands of parents the data that principals in our schools and the teachers in our schools were using to make decisions about academic information so that parents and students could really begin to own and be engaged in that process. So we use student performance data that we are able to get from the New York City Department of Education through New Vision's partnership with the department, have access to individual student data. And using that data, we created 2 data tools. One of them is the ninth grade, what we call the ninth grade tool. And this is specifically focused on helping parents and ninth graders really understand but also track how their students are doing against specific college readiness benchmarks in the ninth grade. And by doing so, they might be able to really help students get to ending ninth grade successfully. New Vision has a particular focus in the ninth grade because both local and national data tells us that most of the students that will not graduate in 4 years or graduate at all are those that are held back in the ninth grade. The ninth grade data tool is color-coded, as you can see. which makes it easier for parents to understand the progression of students towards the benchmarks. So green shows that a student is on track for achieving the ninth grade benchmarks. Yellow means that the student is falling behind, is falling off track. Red means that the student is completely off track, both for graduation and college readiness. We make this particular tool available to parents after each marking period. Going on to the next slide, you can see that there is another tool that we created, which is called the College Readiness Tracker. And this is specifically designed for parents of students in the 10th, 11th, and 12th grade. It allows a parent to see the accumulation of grades, of credits that the students are achieving in each subject area, particularly the core subjects that they need to graduate successfully. It also helps parents to see the state tests that the student has taken and has passed with a 65 or higher. We emphasize to parents and students that they should aim for a 75 in the state's test so that they are more competitive to enter a four-year college. Again, this tool is color-coded, and the blue, any blue on the tool indicates that the student is on track to college readiness. This particular tool is available to students and to parents after every semester. Going on to the next slide, we are really, really excited and encouraged by how our schools are beginning to use these two data tools with students and parents. And if you read the case study that was recently published at the Harvard Family Research Project, you will find some examples of how the schools are using it. But I just wanted to briefly tell you how 10 of our schools this year used the ninth grade tool with the parents of ninth graders that were falling behind, that were falling off track. One thing that the schools did was to conduct a goal-setting session with all of the ninth graders. And during the goal-setting session, they used the ninth grade data tool so that the students could see how they were doing against the benchmarks in the ninth grade, but particularly how they were doing towards achieving 10 or more credits by the end of the year. And then after reviewing the data in the tool, the students identified subjects or student performance data that they needed to improve, and they set specific goals to get back on track or to stay on track. At the same time, the principal and ninth grade teams of teachers in each of the schools held individual family conferences with the parents of ninth graders that were falling behind in credit accumulation. During the family conference, the teachers and the students share with the parent the data on the tool, as well as the credit accumulation goal that the student has set. And together, by the end of the conference, they came out with an action plan that spelled out what both the teachers and the parents would do to help the students reach the performance goal or the credit accumulation goal. What we were so excited about was that all 10 schools showed an increase in the numbers of ninth graders that were promoted with 10 or more credits by the end of the year. And we heard from both the teachers and the principals that the individual family conferences using the tools and helping parents understand graduation and college readiness benchmarks were really a major factor in helping the students that were falling behind get back on track. So looking at challenges and elements for success, we really are learning a lot of lessons as we work with our schools to help them make data sharing with parents a core element of college readiness. And one of those lessons, I think both Jennifer and Zena touched on this, is that this is just a tool. So if it's only handed out to parents at parent-teacher conference, or if it's just clipped to the report card, it really doesn't make a difference. School staff have to ensure that parents and students are well informed of graduation and college readiness benchmarks in order for them to use it. So at the beginning of the school year, our schools are holding sessions and workshops with both parents and ninth graders to talk about graduation and college readiness benchmarks. The other major point that I like to make in terms of challenges, and this has been mentioned before as well, is that the data has to be accurate and it has to be timely. So moving forward, as we look to next year and ways to address some of these challenges, you will see on the next slide that we are expanding the work that the schools have been doing with ninth grade parents and students to the 10th grade, so that there is a sort of a ninth, 10th grade continuum in helping parents and students understand college readiness, be on board with college readiness, and use the data tools to keep them on track to graduation and college readiness. We are also intensifying the training and technical support that we're providing to our schools so that they could really engage parents more effectively and prepare students for success, not just during the 4 years of high school, but more importantly for success once they leave high school and enter college or the world of work. I'm going to leave it there, and thank you so much for inviting me to share our work with all of you.
Thank you so much, Barbara. And I do want to remind our participants that the webinar will be archived. I want to say that along with the archive of the webinar, there will be on the website a list of resources, including the one that you referenced today that the Harvard Family Resource Project put out, as well as participants will receive an email with that list of resources. One of the questions, Barbara, for you that has been asked several times is talking about your system working with students of all types, whether it be low socioeconomic or students with disabilities, and they just wanted to know how you do, is that what you are doing and how you're doing
that? The data tools are available in English and Spanish. And one of the wonderful things that some of our schools are doing is adapting these tools for use with a special student population, particularly English language learners as well as special education students. So one of our schools, for example, based on the work that they did with the ninth grade students and parents this year, and I should mention that 90% of the students in our schools are low-income, students from low-income and minority backgrounds. But one of our schools is going to use the tool as well as sort of all the other components of our ninth grade parent engagement model with parents of special ed students.
Great. Barbara, thank you so much. And again, we will have some questions and answers at the end of our full webinar presentations. Barbara pointed out that New Visions has tools for parents and families, and there is a focus on secondary schools, although they, as she just talked about, work with many students of many walks of life. Very much focused on college and career readiness, and how the data that Jennifer Saltzstein talked about in terms of the ARIS data and New Visions being not only centrally located and working with some of the same schools, is collaborative, but it is systemic in how they are planning for the future of many of these secondary school students. Our next presenter is Delisa Crane from the Nevada State Parental Information and Resource Center, the PERC. She has been the grant administrator there for the last 6 years, and the PERC, as well as other national PERCs across the United States and territories, help to implement successful and effective parental involvement and engagement policies, programs, and activities that lead to improvements in student academic achievement, as well as strengthen partnerships among parents, teachers, principals, administrators, and other school personnel in meeting the education needs of children. Delisa brings much experience to the PERC. She holds a bachelor's in public relations and a master's in education, as well as a teaching credential, and is pursuing a doctorate in education focused on family engagement. She previously worked as a development director for a health-related nonprofit organization and as a marketing director. We are very happy that Delisa will be here with us right now to talk about her parent-school partnership program that has been implemented in Washoe County and across the state of Nevada. Delisa.
Thanks, Zena. Before I begin sharing a few of our, I'd like to just give you some context for the work that we're doing in one of our local districts. Washoe County has about 104 schools, 63,000 students, and we're the 57th largest district in the nation. Our district did a study from the leave rate, graduation rate, to a cohort graduation rate, we learned that our district had a 56% graduation rate. And we wanted to start looking at how graduation requirements were communicated to parents. So most of the time it was in the gymnasium. There were 200 families on the bleachers, and a principal might have been delivering a PowerPoint that was sometimes communicated in multiple languages and sometimes not. And it wasn't necessarily a comfortable environment for many of our families to be able to ask questions and clarify their knowledge. And our district has a large percentage of families that come from different educational backgrounds, so they're not necessarily familiar with our system. We also have Edline, which is an online tool that parents can access grades and attendance information about their students. When we started looking at who was using Edline and who was not, we really saw that this was an untapped resource for parents to be able to monitor their child's progress. And so we knew that we could do some work on Edline with outreach and empowering parents with how to use that tool. So what is it exactly that we do? We have several 2-hour workshops that we work with parents. We invite 25 to 30 parents to a class. So we like to work with small groups so that it feels comfortable and that parents can have conversations and ask questions. Parent liaisons at the school site are critically important when we're inviting families to classes. At schools where that liaison has done a good day-to-day job of building relationships with families, we have higher attendance and we are more successful at reaching out to hard-to-reach parents. So we start with a PowerPoint tool and then we move into online hands-on computers with parents. So this is an example of part of our PowerPoint tool, and these examples of unexcused and excused absences came from our conversations with families. So there was a lot of confusion about what is an unexcused absence. We have parents in our county that are working multiple jobs and are afraid of losing their jobs, and so sometimes we have older students staying home to care for younger siblings when they're sick. And so we wanted to clarify things like that for families and give them the knowledge they needed so that their students could stay on track with attendance to graduate from high school. Sometimes as educators, I think we assume things that parents know. So A, B, C, D, F does not always make sense to families who come from a different educational system that might have a numeric grading system. And so we've had some conversations with parents where their children have told them that F stands for fantastico, and if the family does not speak English, has not been to the school, and comes from a different educational system, that might make sense to them until somebody tells them differently. We were also standing at the back of the room at a couple of different workshops, and we were listening to parents in Spanish trying to get the language straight for freshman, sophomore, junior, and senior. Those were not terms that they were familiar with, and they were not part of their background knowledge. So after we've gone through our PowerPoint tool with parents about high school graduation requirements, we really wanted parents to walk away from the workshop knowing the information. So we decided to use case studies and pair parents in even smaller groups of 4 to 5 parents. So we provide them this case study, give them a specified amount of time, and they work through this fictitious student to determine whether or not they're on track to graduate, and then they build a plan. What would they do if they were Sandra's parents? And I think this has been successful. Parents teach other parents in those small groups, and they help to clarify their knowledge and really solidify their knowledge so that they can walk away and be prepared to help their own students. Next, after we've gone through the graduation requirements and parents have that background knowledge, we want to make their own data meaningful to them and then apply that knowledge so that they can help their own students. So as I said before, as the first slide indicated, we realized that a lot of our hard-to-reach parents were not activating their Edline accounts. And we knew that was because there were many barriers. These families might not have used a computer before. They might not have internet access at home. So we wanted to reach out with our parent liaisons, invite them into the schools, and really help them to get on the system. Some things that were critical were many of these classes would happen at 7 o'clock at night, and we'd have parents coming from multiple schools. Sometimes a parent might bring a friend from another school. So it was critical that we had access to their access account to be able to get them a username and a password right then. We didn't want to lose those parents. So we worked in partnership with our district to make sure that we could access that parent's information and get them on right there. And a very valuable lesson that we learned when we did this was that it was a lot to ask our parents who've never been on a computer before to navigate a mouse, to try to understand background information about their child's data, and to understand what to do with that data all at the same time. So we start the workshop by reviewing what they'll see before they actually get on a computer. So this is a snapshot of what parents would see on Edline, and as you can see, we're highlighting areas that they might focus in on. So there is an unexcused tardy or unexcused absences, or if the child does have grades that are failing, we focus them in on that and then empower them with the knowledge they need to be able to help their student and to create an action plan to address those things. So one of the moms that we were working with said, I don't understand why my child's not attending. I drop him off at school every day, but it says right here that he's not attending class. And so then it was a matter of connecting that parent to the high school and to a counselor so that the mom and the counselor could meet up and transfer the student every morning so that that student would start attending school. So how can community organizations and PERCs help across the nation? School districts could really use the expertise. PERCs are the experts in reaching hard-to-reach parents, in building tools that make sense to parents. Sometimes as educators we get, I think, so steeped in our own jargon and in our own daily educational language that we don't always build tools that are meaningful for parents. So having that parent perspective while you're building the tools is critical. Most online portal systems on the back end have very specific data about who is using the portal and who is not using the portal. And so schools can be very targeted in their outreach of knowing, I want to invite these 30 parents to the next workshop, and we're going to make personal phone calls and invite them in and empower them with the knowledge they need to be able to get on and activate their own account. It was also a major barrier when we first started doing this work that some of our schools, especially schools with a large percentage of parents in free and reduced lunch, they had pretty low expectations of their families. We actually had a school that said to us, well, we've chosen not to use Edline because our parents don't have internet access at home. So flipping that around and empowering schools that they can do this outreach, they can empower parents, they can build their capacity to get on and they can open up their computer labs during the week so that families can come in and access their child's data. So that becomes critical in reaching those educators to flip their perceptions around. And finally, working with community-based organizations. So we work with our Boys and Girls Club here to put a kiosk because we know that's where parents go after work to pick up their children. So at that kiosk, they can get online and check Edline right there. We also work with our libraries because we know that they're available on the weekends and after hours. So future plans for our local district, we are switching to a parent portal that is more robust. It's going to have data about behavior, health information, assessment data, and also a graduation planner. And we are going to hold our schools accountable for growth in reaching out to families and activating them on our new parent portal, which is Infinite Campus. And so we are going to pair that with risk data. So schools will be responsible for making growth on their number of outreach and activation and utilization for especially our at-risk families. And finally, here are instructions. All of our materials can be shared, customized for your own district, more than willing to share. That's it.
Delisa, thank you so much. I think we'll leave that slide up so that folks might want to write down that website. It was most helpful to hear about your PERC and what your school partnership program is doing in regards to getting parents and families engaged with the data and training them. Several folks have asked us a little bit more about your parent liaisons. They wanted to know volunteer, paid employee, what type of skills might they have. Could you just talk for a minute about your parent liaisons?
Sure. Our local school district uses Title I funding, and every single Title I school at a minimum is required to hire a parent liaison for their school. Most are full-time, some are three-quarter time, depending on how much Title I funding that school gets. We hire them particularly for their outreach skills. So it needs to be a very personable person. A lot of times we'll hire parent liaisons that are from the neighborhood, that already know the families and have a good established relationship in the neighborhood. Obviously, bilingual is extremely important in some of our schools. It is in our new district strategic plan for Washoe County School District to have a parent liaison in every single one of our schools, and we are currently exploring some other sources of funding, like AmeriCorps Vista volunteers, working with our university to engage some graduate students that might work 20 hours a week in some of our schools as parent liaisons.
Thank you so much, Delisa, for your presentation and informing the participants about how to use parent liaisons, and in particular how you've worked with parents with limited English proficiency and immigrant populations, and the kinds of supportive resources and tools that you have put on, up both on the internet and accessible for all populations and stakeholders. We are now that you have been provided both by our presenters and throughout the questions that may have been posed in this webinar. You know, clearly data systems have been put in place that are accessible, user-friendly, and informative in these particular examples, and are systemic in nature and are moving us towards the type of data systems that we think will be most helpful in decision-making and implementation to engage families in their children's learning. We have several questions that came up and in our chat, and one of the first ones that was posed across our varying presenters was around the type of training that is provided for parents who don't know how to use a computer, and the kinds of conferences and other trainings that parents have gotten involved with in terms of the content. For those of you who would like to respond to that, would you please?
Hi, this is Jennifer. We have found, so I thought Delisa did a great job of articulating how to support parents. We've also found that while many parents may not feel comfortable using a computer, their students do. And so working with their students to help them log in, to help them feel more comfortable, has been one avenue for supporting parents. We've also done work with an organization in New York City called Learning Leaders. Learning Leaders has volunteers in many New York City schools, and those are parents who have then helped parents use computers and helped give some training to them. And then in New York City schools, there are also parent coordinators at most schools, and so we've done a lot of training with parent coordinators to help them feel comfortable, helping parents get an email address, and helping parents feel more comfortable in the technology.
Does anyone else want to respond to that? Okay. Another question that has been posed is, do you think that the educational standards that we have now should stay focused on accountability and data-driven instead of just having a more rigorous?
Zena, this is Delisa. I'm absolutely not a curriculum expert and would not try to go as deep as I think that question could be. But what I can say about data and families is that I think that our families sometimes that need the data the most about their students are the families who have never been on a computer, might not understand what online relational databases are when they get the letter at home. And so I think because we have so much data and because families could really use that data to monitor their students' progress and to help them be successful, it's imperative, I think, that our schools and our districts reach out to families and help them to understand the data and break it down so that it's meaningful for their students.
Great.
And this is Barbara, Zena. I just wanted to add that I don't think it is an either-or in terms of rigor and holistic education for our children or data-driven and accountability. I think that it has to be both, and particularly when our students leave high school and are going to enter either the world of work or post-secondary education institutions that are really focused on accountability and results and use of data. So for me, I think it's a combination of both, and including parents and students in that.
Thank you, Delisa and Barbara. Another question that has been posed by a number of our participants is, how do the schools and teachers work with the parents to identify students who are at risk using the data that's available to them?
Zena, I can talk a little bit about what our local district has done. They've created a risk index, which is built on a number of different demographics. So going into 9th grade, we know students who have less than a 90% attendance rate. We know students that are scoring below grade level on their state assessment exams. And we know their mobility. So if they've moved schools regularly, we also know that. So we put some of that data in addition to some other data in an index. And our public policy accountability, our data department basically has created lists for our schools of students coming into 9th grade, and we have specific names. So we know that at one of our schools there might be 125 students coming into 9th grade that are at risk of not graduating based on the risk index.
Does anyone else want to comment on that issue about helping parents use the data and helping teachers use the data to determine the risk and to look at plans for those students?
Zena, I think one of the things that I mentioned in my presentation is how in the 10 schools that we worked with this year, they're really taking the data tool, and sometimes when the data is not readily available, they will use other sources like ARIS or some other data systems that are available to the schools to identify the students that are falling behind and to immediately bring the parents and the students into a process of understanding where is it that they're falling behind and then what needs to be done immediately to help the students get back on track. Our schools in the New Vision schools could really do that in the 10th, 11th, and 12th grade as soon as the school year begins. With the 9th grade, during the first marking period, there's really no data, no student performance data in the 9th grade until maybe 5 5 weeks into the school year. But the teachers and the parents and the students in sort of workshop-like sessions can use, for example, the ARIES Parent Link, which has information about middle school and middle school performance. If they really wanted to build in data to some of those early sessions around graduation requirements and college readiness, and have data available for the students to really see how they did in middle school, and then to plan for what they need to do in the ninth grade.
Thank you for responding to that question. We have another question here about your experiences across the panelists in connecting school data with the out-of-school time or extended day program data, and also in connecting to the out-of-school time staff regarding the data. Have you had any experiences with that you can talk to?
Zena, this is Delisa again. We have a couple of schools that have done an amazing job in their out-of-school program of having just a parent checkpoint. So when the parent came to pick up the student every day, the staff person for the after-school program would sit down with the parents and go over the student's day in terms of what did they learn. So that would be a time where they could share grade information. It's a daily conversation with parents, because we know that our families, especially when their kids are in after-school programs, can't always make it to the school during working hours. So just having that simple checkpoint, that time when a parent checked in with their child and the after-school person, they could share information about the day and what the student was learning and data.
Thank you, Delisa. We've had a number of questions asking about funding and how these data systems have been able to be put into place, the manpower around it and so forth. Can the panelists speak to some of that as well?
Hi, this is Jennifer. So the funding for ARIS Parent Link has really been an outgrowth of ARIS. And so the funding for that was to build this data system. And I think that that's one of the challenges we continue to face in this tough budget time, is how do we identify private sources of funding to really extend and enhance the tools, given that there are so many priorities.
Anybody else want to join in on that conversation? Okay, and we'll now have one last question before we have to end our webinar for today. We have some folks who are participating who are interested in finding out about the way in which the data travels from students from elementary school to middle school to high school. Can any of you talk about the systems you have in place and how that occurs?
This is Jennifer. In New York City, every student has a unique number, a Gnosis ID, that allows us to tie together the data. So a lot of the work of developing ARIS and ARIS Parent Link was to unite the source systems. But what's really nice is that because it is associated with the student, it follows the student as they're using those different systems. And so the key, at least from our perspective, has been to make sure that you have that individual identifier that will follow the student through the system. And then there is a ton of work that I'm not the right person to speak to in terms of actually building the operational databases and building that data core.
Zena, this is Delisa, and our parent portal, our new parent portal, Infinite Campus, is directly connected to the student information system for the entire district, which teachers also use for their grade book, which our data department uses for their assessment data, which schools use for their daily attendance. So it's all online, real time, and it's all connected in one large system.
And this is Barbara. We are developing something that you saw on the slide, a system called Datacation, which will allow the New Vision schools to sort of have access to data in a very different way, as well as the tools in a very different way. And I think it would also allow parents. We don't have a lot of elementary school. We only have a few elementary school and also a few middle schools. And most of our schools are high schools. But for the schools in our network, they would be able to, through Datacation, be able to see if a student is coming from middle school. That data will follow them into high school, and they'll be able to access that. And we hope that parents will also have that opportunity once the Datacation system is in place.
Thank you so much, panelists, for all that you have provided to our participants today.